Hey everybody, welcome to Board Game Heaven. My name is Raymond, and in this video I'll be taking a look at Shadowrift 2nd edition by Starling Games, who were kind enough to send me a copy to review. This is a cooperative deck building game for 1 to 6 players, which plays in about 45 to 120 minutes for ages 14 and up. And in this game, you're all playing heroes defending the town of New Haven against a number of monsters coming through a shadow rift, which you need to close, or you need to defend the town by building walls. Now in this video I'll show you how to set up the game, I'll teach the rules, and I'll share my final thoughts on the game. But before I do, I'd like to point you towards my Patreon page, because if you like what I do and you'd like to support me, then just go to my Patreon page and become a Patreon saint for as little as just $1 a month or more, which is greatly appreciated, really helps my channel. And in return you'll get early access to my videos, you'll get access to some Patreon exclusive posts and videos, as well as my Twitch VODs, and your name in the credits of my videos as a supporter. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get started. To set up a game of Shadowrift, you take the board and put it on the table. You can also play without the board, but I do recommend using it because it is very nice and immersive, in my opinion, has spots for all of the cards and really helps you to manage the game. Then you pick a monster faction. There are 6 in the core game, there are several in expansions as well. And as a first game, the rules suggest you use the fire dragons, which are these cards here. And it tells you on the lower bottom here that it is the fire dragons faction, and there are several others which have the text here as well. And there are several different cards in those decks. And you simply take that deck, give that a shuffle, and then you divide it in roughly 2 equal stacks. So just kind of divide it like this. And then you take the Shadowrift cards, which are these cards. The separate card also says Shadowrift here, as well as here, of course. And you take a number of cards equal to the number of players. Actually, characters, because you can technically play this game solo and play with 2 decks if you want to, but you put 1 Shadowrift in per character, and normally every player would play 1 character. So in a 2-player game, for example, you'll take 2 of these and then you shuffle those in to the decks. And if you're in a situation with 3 or 5 players, you take the deck that has the most cards, so you round up and you put that one, give that a shuffle, and put that one on top of the other deck. So the lower half will have the least cards in an unequal number of players, and the top half will have the most. So you'll have that, and you put that over here on the monster deck space. And the rulebook also suggests several skills, attacks and actions and loot cards to use for your first game, but you can also select which cards you want to use, or use randomizer cards, or otherwise use the scenarios in the back of the book, which has all the different factions, all the different monsters, with the suggested cards that you use. So there's 6 of those as well. And if you're more familiar with the game, you can also simply pick your cards yourself. So for this game, we'll go with the suggested cards, and we'll take the Frenzy skill cards. Again, it says skill here in the bottom, so you know what they are. So we got 6 of those. The Frenzy card, just put them here in one of the spots on the hero spot there. This is basically the training grounds where you learn those skills. We got Holy Aura, so we have that as well. Just put that here as well, and just put the other cards back into the box. Next, the suggested attack cards. Once again, you can see right there that they are attack cards. We've got Wild Charge. We've got Thieving Strike. We'll take that as well. We've got Spear Volley. And those are the 3 attacks that are suggested, and the rest just goes back into the box. The suggested action card we use is the heal spell, and again here it says that this is an action. So we got the heal action. We'll take that and all the rest again back into the box, which leaves us with 2 spots for loot. In this case, these are the loot cards, and they suggest using the Shining Blade and the Armor of Mist. So that's that, and this is all set up, and return the other cards to the box. Some cards are always in the game and they are printed on the board already. There's Heroism, Might, Strike cards, and Wounds and Seals. So just take those cards from the box and you can place them on these spots. Except for the Heroism card, you use 5 per player and again per player character. So again, if you're playing solo with 2 hands, just add 10 cards. 5 per player per character. And you put the Heroism over here. There are Strike cards, which you can put over here. There's the Might cards, which go here. There's the Seals, these 4 cards, which go here. And there are a whole lot of wound cards. You'll be suffering a lot of wounds in this game, and those go here. You also have coins, which aren't cards, but they are represented by actual cardboard coins here. So you just take those and put them in a stack over here. Every monster faction also has a special card. So for the fire dragons, that is the burn card over here. You can see that is an affliction. It's a burn card, which also does bad things. And other monster decks will have other monster specials. For example, the Necromancer deck will have zombies. You can see here Necromancers in the bottom. So that would be the monster special deck if you're playing with that monster faction. You also have these corpse cards, which will come into play when your villagers get killed by the monsters. And you put those over here on the graveyard there. There's a spot for the walls. The game comes with 8 walls of 4 different types. So you got 2 moats, 2 stone walls, 2 shrines, and 2 magic barriers. You don't need to shuffle these. You just can put them over here and you can look through this stack anytime you want. And what I like to do is just put them like so I can still see the cost. It's a bit tricky with sleeved cards, but it kind of works like this. And finally, there's the Traveler deck and the Town deck, which has villagers. These are visiting villagers, and these are villagers already in the town of New Haven. So you just take the villager cards. Again, villager says it right here. You give that deck a shuffle, and you put that down here. And the other villagers are indicated with Traveler here. There are still villagers, as you can see, but they have the Traveler here. And there are different kinds. There are friendly travelers that you can recruit by paying their cost when they are in the visiting spots. But there are also these traders, basically, that come into your town automatically, but do bad things. So you just shuffle those in with the rest. So you give that deck a shuffle and you put that on the Traveler deck. Every player gets a deck of starting cards, which are indicated with this wooden sword in the bottom right. And you always get 2 strikes, 1 explorer card, and 7 prowess. So you take those cards, every player has one of these decks, you give that a good shuffle, and that will be your starting deck. And you draw 5 cards into your hand to start. So in this case, we're playing a 2-player game. So again, same deck for the second player. And that also gets a good shuffle. And they also draw 5 cards. Put those tokens nearby. There's double-sided moon tokens right here with the crescent moon and the red token on the back, which you can use to indicate wounds that you deal to the monsters. And there's the bigger ones with the full moon and the purple orb on the back, which are basically 5 wounds. Also take this standee, which is used to indicate which player is the next player to get a heroism card whenever you kill a monster. More on that in the rules. And now you're ready to play. Let's explain the rules. Right, so Shadowrift is a deck building game. So you'll be buying cards, adding them to your deck, and improving your hand, hopefully. And if there are cards that contradict the rules in the rule book, then the card takes precedence. Whenever you can't do something that a card tells you to do, you simply don't do it. And if you are presented with a choice, for example, discard a spell or gain a burn, and you cannot do one of the options because you have no spells in hand or the burn stack is empty, then you are required to do the other if possible, and if neither option is possible, nothing happens. You win the game by finding and sealing all of the Shadow Rifts in the monster deck, or if you construct all 8 of the walls. There are 3 ways to lose. You lose if the town square contains no villagers or walls, because when you construct them, they enter your villager deck. So if there's no villagers or walls here at any time, you lose. And keep in mind that the infiltrators do not count as villagers for that purpose. You also lose when the corpse deck is empty, so when you add the last corpse card to your villager deck, or you lose when a monster takes the annihilation action and destroys the world. So like I said at the start of a round, every player draws 5 cards. So if you've shuffled this well, you draw 5 cards, and the rest of your deck is still your draw deck. You just place that back. And whenever you run out of cards to draw, you will shuffle your discard pile. So you're going to keep a discard pile face up next to your draw pile with all the cards you've already used in a previous round. And then when you need to draw cards and you don't have 5, then your draw pile is empty. You simply shuffle your discard pile and make that your new draw pile, and then continue drawing until you have 5 cards. So then you look at your hand, and I didn't shuffle that very well, of course, but then you just can see what you can do with this. But before you start, there's a couple of other things you still need to do. First of all, you refresh the town square. So if there were already cards in the town square, they are all placed into the discard pile over here. And basically the town square is a shared hand. You can see it as an extra deck of cards that all the players can use. It's also 5 cards, just like the cards that you would draw. So you simply take the first 5 cards and you put them in the town square at the start of a round. And just like with your hand, if the town deck ever runs out, see there's 5 cards still left here, but if there were less for the next time I would draw from this deck, then again you can shuffle the discard pile and just create a new deck and then continue drawing until the town square is filled again. Next, you refresh the traveler spots. So this is your traveler deck. You gave that a shuffle. There's always 2 visitors. Any visitors that were already here are put on the bottom of your traveler deck. And the travelers will just be here until you can and wish to recruit them, at which point you buy them, you pay the cost, and you put them in your town discard pile. Now, any traveler infiltrator here, so the red cards, the red villagers, are immediately picked up because they do not have a cost. They just have this dagger symbol here, and they are immediately placed into your town discard pile. And of course they will be shuffled into the deck later when this runs out, and then they will at some point return into the town square and cause, bad things to happen. And any infiltrators placed in the town discard pile are not immediately replaced. So now for this round we'd be stuck with just 1 traveler, and only on the next round with this one, if not recruited, go to the bottom of this deck and then 2 new cards would be put out. Now step 4, the monsters will act. So what you do is usually you'd put the top card, which is in this case a Shadowrift, so I'll just shuffle that a little bit lower just so I can demonstrate. I think I need to put it this way. So you can take the top card and you put it face up so you can see what's coming. Now, if, for example, all of these spots were already filled with monsters or with a Shadow Rift, Then before the round starts, before the players start doing their thing, the final monster here in spot 3 is moved into the monster power area. So you can move it like this so you can still see this number. No, actually it's the other way around. It's these icons that you need to see here. These are the monster power icons. So I just put them down like this, and then you can stack them so you can easily count. Then the monster in space 2 is moving to space 3, and it will do its third action. So every monster card has these 3 actions, which are activated when it moves into that monster spot. So this card would move from 2 to 3, and then it would do the third action here, which means each hero discards 2 cards or gains a burn. So you need to do that. If you cannot discard 2 cards, you will gain a burn. So that is what this monster does. We resolve that first, then the next monster from spot 1 goes to spot 2 and will do the second action here, add a corpse to the town discard. Right, so it's eaten one of the villagers. And then this, of course, is a Shadowrift, so it doesn't do anything, but is just moved. And as you can see, when a Shadowrift is sealed, you need to seal these. It is removed from the game, and if all Shadowrifts are sealed, the heroes win. That's one of the win conditions. So there we go. Now on the right, there is the monster power track. So depending on the number of players, you start out with a number of power for the monster. So with a 2-player game, you can just take one of these tokens and put it on that number. So we start out with 2 power right here. And if you're not using the board, you simply just take a number of tokens equal to the power and just keep them in a stack nearby. But I like using the track instead, because you also use these to indicate wounds that you deal to the monsters. So then after that's happened, again, you just flip over the top card so you can see what that is. It's always face up. Now if you happen to draw a power card, there are power cards as well, you move it immediately to the monster power area. But if it's a monster and you can pay the power cost, then it moves to the monster start. So for example, if that card here costs 3 power and this track was at 3 or more, then you have to pay that number of points. So in this card case 3, so 1, 2, 3, the power goes down, and then this card is placed onto the start deck, and then you can flip over the next one to see what's coming. And as long as there are enough power points to bring cards into play, you just keep doing that, because monster cards can occupy the same space. So for example, if this had also come into play, it would have just been placed there, or it could also have been over here if it was already in play. So there can be multiple monsters in one spot. And so, like I said, you just keep adding cards until you can no longer afford the next monster. And then finally you check if the losing conditions aren't triggered. For example, you know, when all the villagers are gone from the town square, there's only corpses and no walls either, or maybe some of these bad cards, or any other of the losing conditions. So if you're still alive, then you can finally start playing. The game has 3 types of resources that you can use. There's, like here, the coins, which are indicated with the round gold symbol. There's prowess, which is indicated with this banner and a number, usually. And there's magic, which is indicated with this blue icon right there. And there's these heroism cards that can be used for any of the 3. So then players take their actions, they play their cards, and after all the players have done that, then you have still a cleanup phase to do. Some cards will say that they will remain in play specifically, and other cards you play this round, and all cards left in your hand go into your discard pile. And once the cleanup is done, you just start from step 1 again. And all of those steps are on the back of the rule book as a handy reference, because there are quite a few steps to go through. So this helps you to keep that in mind. There's also a true solo variant when you're playing with just one deck and not 2 decks yourself. And that tells you that there are 8 heroism cards instead of 5. You know, there's usually 5 per player. There are still 2 shadow rifts, one in the top half and one in the bottom half. The monsters gain power as if there were 3 players. Negative effects that target each hero or all heroes hit the player twice because there's only 1 player, but the player also takes 2 turns per monster turns. So here it has a summary of how that works. So things the heroes can do on their turn are also explained right here and in more detail in the rulebook. We'll go through them in a bit. So what you can do is, in any order, you can seek aid, play cards, which are resources, actions, attacks, skills, and loots. You can gain new hero cards from the hero pile over here, these 8 cards. You can hire villagers from the traveler's deck or from the town square by paying their cost. Or you can build walls again by getting one of those cards by paying its cost. So that already sounds pretty straightforward, so let's go through those in a bit more detail. So seeking aid means you may move a villager with the aid term on its description from the town square to the discard to gain its effect. So for example, here's the merchant that we put out here. It says aid, gain a coin. So you can simply do that. You don't need to pay this because that would not make sense. This is for when a villager exits the village, then goes on the bottom of the traveler deck and might return at some point, and then you can recruit them. So the existing villagers are a bit cheaper than the traveling ones, but more on that in a bit. So you can gain a coin if you use this guy. So you just take him, put him in the discard pile, and you gain a coin. Next, you can play actions, and when you play an action, it's basically one of your cards, you put it on the table in front of you and you do what it says. And many actions have boosted effects. For example, this card is Blessed Smite. It does 2 melee damage, but it also has this icon here. So for 1 magic, if you have it, you can pay 1 magic to draw a card, and then each hero may heal a wound from in hand to draw a card. So that's pretty powerful, but you need to pay a magic to do so. And you can choose to resolve that boosted effect before you actually resolve the regular text on the card. So you can do that in any order. Whenever you deal damage to a monster, you simply pick one of the monsters and you take a number of damage tokens, so these red ones, and you put them on the monster you're attacking, like so. And if you use multiple effects or cards to deal damage to the same monster, that is considered 1 attack. Because if any attacks are melee, so short range attacks, then the hero will take 1 wound, and that's 1 wound per battle, basically. So if you have multiple cards damaging that, you will still take 1 wound. And when that happens, you simply take a wound card from the stack and you put it in your discard pile. And wounds, as you may have guessed, don't do anything, so they make your deck less effective, and you can get rid of them by paying 2 of this might to remove it from the deck, and you then simply place it back on this stack. Sometimes you'll also find a villager or maybe another player can help you to get rid of a wound, but you can also only get rid of it when it's in your hand. Whenever the damage on a monster is ever equal to or greater than its health, which is on the top here, so you can see it has a heart symbol here with the number 4, so it can only take 4 damage and then it is killed, then it's simply removed from the game. So you can remove it here from the game board, but you have to place it back at the bottom of the monster deck. So now whenever you kill a monster, all the heroes are rewarded a number of heroism equal to the number of faction symbols on the card. So let's say they manage to kill this monster. It has 3 faction symbols over there. That means you take 3 of these heroism cards and divide them evenly among the players. Now in this case there's 2 players, so the player dealing the killing blow gets 1 heroism first, and then the other player gets the second, and then that player gets the third. Now in the case of more players than heroism to deal out, then you will give this marker to the first player in line to get a heroism. So if you're playing a 4-player game and there are 3 points of heroism to be dealt out, then either the player who killed it or the player who has this gets the first heroism card, and then you simply continue again in clockwise order, giving the next player another heroism marker. So at some point this could happen when one player kills a creature and they don't get a heroism card because somebody else was next in line, and then they get one, and then the next player. So that's how that works. So you keep basically handing out heroism in clockwise order. Another thing you can do on your turn, if you have a seal card in your deck or on your hand, and you've drawn this, then you can use this to put a card from the monster power area over there on the bottom of the monster deck, so you reduce their power. And if you have a magic to spend, which is of course very important, then you can seal a Shadowrift in play, removing it from the game. And that hero earns 1 heroism for the party. So that's a very important action. If you can take it, that removes one of the Shadowrifts from the game. You can just put it next to the board, and then 1 heroism card is given to the player who has this next heroism marker. You can also play loot and skill cards if you have them, and some of them will have a description that lets you keep the card in play even during the cleanup phase when all of your played cards are put into your discard pile. So for example here, the Holy Aura says that you may pay 1 prowess to keep this card in play during the cleanup. So that's something you can do. Or, for example, this loot card, the Shining Blade, says loot remains in play during cleanup. So that's handy to have. You can spend resources from your hand. So let's say if this was my hand, I've got 5 of these prowess cards, and they are all worth 1 prowess from my starting hand. I can just use 4 of those, for example, to buy a healing card or a wild charge or a thieving strike. These are all worth 4. These are 3. And for these I need coins, so I need to have and spend coins. You simply put them back here. So much like most deck builders, you just use those cards and then buy the card you want to have, and any card you buy, so let's say I've bought this, is placed into your discard pile. And aside from playing cards that have special actions on them, or paying resources to activate a boosted action on those cards, or buying cards from the hero stacks over here, or using one of the villagers to help you, you can also recruit a traveler to become one of your villagers by paying the cost on the bottom here. So again, you spend those resources from your hand if you have them, and coins are of course just a collective resource, so you gather them and you just keep them together, and any player can use those. So then you can recruit a visitor, and you can put them in the discard pile, and they will be shuffled into the town deck later, so they can help you. Or you can try to build a wall if that's what you're going for. If you're not going for closing the Shadow Rifts, but you want to fortify New Haven, you can buy one of those walls by paying the resources at the bottom here. And these are quite expensive, so you need to save up for those. And they are also placed in the discard pile of your town deck. Now remember, I showed you this card, the Blessed Smite here. If a card has this symbol, that's the epic icon, it can only be played once a turn. So basically a hero can only do 1 epic action on their turn unless a card says otherwise. And like I mentioned before, sometimes a monster will kill a villager. So for example, if it's the next round and this one moved here to the monster power pile, and this one moves here, it activates its 3rd action and it says kill a villager with the hammer symbol, and this one says kill a villager with the bread symbol. So you basically look at your current town square. See, we have a guy with a bread here and a stonemason with the hammer here. We have some guards as well. So that means you have to pick and kill one of those villagers. And whenever that happens, so in this case there wasn't really a choice, there's just the stonemason, and that stonemason is returned or just placed at the bottom of the traveler deck, so he might return at some point, then a corpse card is placed on its spot. Now some monsters will say add a corpse. That is not considered a kill, and then that corpse card is placed in the discard pile directly. Some monsters also have the ability to break a wall, so when that happens and there is a wall in the town square, then you simply take that card and put it back on the wall stack. And whenever a monster wants to kill a villager or break a wall and there is no target present, it will hunt, and that means it will attempt to kill someone at random. And what that means is you simply discard cards from the villager deck, from the town deck, until you reveal either a villager or a wall. So in this case, here's the mayor, that's a villager, and it includes the red cards, so the infiltrators as well. And that villager is killed, and again placed on bottom of the traveler deck. And another corpse is added, and in this case it wasn't in the town square, so you don't put it in place of the card, but you put it directly in the discard pile. If it was a wall, then no corpse is added, but that wall card is simply placed back on the stack. If the monster has a heroism value of 2 or 3. If the monster's value is less than 2, then the wall is not broken, but the hunt still ends. If the town deck runs out while a monster is hunting, you search the discard pile for a valid target, and if there is none, you shuffle the town discard and continue the hunt. Now you will notice there's also guards, and guards are a bit special because they have a reaction skill, and it says when another town card would be killed or broken, so a villager or wall, a guard dies instead. So instead of killing that stonemason earlier, one of the guards would have stepped in, and that guard would have been placed on the bottom of the traveler deck, but you still get a corpse token in its place. And a guard will do that for any villager, regardless if it's an infiltrator. Any monsters that leave town, so move from the third spot into the power area, are gone. You remove all of their damage tokens if they haven't been killed yet, and they're just gone. So that also means that you can no longer attack it. Some monsters have the rampage action, and when that happens, you set it aside with all of its damage tokens. So this one doesn't have rampage, but say it does, and it already had some damage, and maybe it was over here. It goes on a rampage for the monster 2 action. If it moved from here to there, you set it aside. Then you wait until all the other monsters have acted, and then you put it back on the start space with all of its tokens. And like I said earlier, a few monsters also have the annihilation action, and if a monster is allowed to take that action, you lose the game immediately. Some monster actions can be interrupted, so there's, for example, the moat. Here, if that is in the town square, if you built that wall and it's in the town square, then it says here a monster attempts a non-kill effect, discard the top card of the town deck. And if it's a wall or a guard, prevent the monster's action. So you just prevent an action entirely. The child here, for example, innocent child, has a reaction as well. Ignore any annihilation actions while the child is in play. So that's a pretty powerful ability as well, because while the child is in play, there is always hope. Now, monsters sometimes also have certain reactions. So like this card, we saw this earlier. This, for example, has a reaction here that says the first hero to attack each round gains a burn. So there's several of those things that can happen as well. And a final thing I should mention is that the monster deck also has so-called power cards. This case, this card doesn't cost any power from the monsters, it just happens, and these don't go from spot to spot. These are placed immediately in the power action. They do have a power symbol here, so they do add up, but this is an effect that stays in place, so you're better off putting them separate like this, because you need to be able to read what they do. And in this case, the Rain of Fire says whenever a hero plays a seal or buys a villager, or builds a wall, then that hero gains a burn. So that is in effect permanently. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And those are all the basic rules for playing Shadowrift 2nd edition. Let's go to my final thoughts. Alright, so my final thoughts on Shadowrift 2nd edition by Starling Games. Let me start with the components. So the components are pretty basic. I mean, the board is really good. I like it. The cards are of a good quality. I did sleeve them, of course. They are of a nice and thick quality. They're very smooth. They have a shiny kind of finish. But I do recommend sleeving them because this is a deck builder and you will be shuffling these cards a lot. So to prevent them from fraying along the edges, I always sleeve them. Otherwise, the tokens are nice. There's not a whole bunch of them, but they are thick cardboard, so that's a good quality. And the box itself is also nice and sturdy, has a divider to put all your cards in with little big divider cards that you can put in between with text on them, so you can separate all of the different cards very easily, which really helps with the setup and the breakdown. I like the fact that it has these coins as well, these big tokens that you can just grab and share with the rest of the players. There are also some tokens if you do not want to use the board that indicate where you can put your monster cards. You have the 1, 2, and 3 in the starting tiles basically, and you can set it up however you want. But I do really enjoy using the board. It's of a good thick quality, and the printing on it is also very nice. The artwork is amazing. I really love the art on all the cards. Very beautifully done, very thematic. I like that you can clearly see what monsters there are with different types of monsters. You can see what the skills do more or less from just looking at the card. And the art is also very consistent. There are different artists I've noticed on the cards, but the art style is very consistent and I really do appreciate that. And all the different cards have their own unique artwork as well. I also like the theme. It is yet another fantasy game, but I think it works well for this game. You're in the town of New Haven, which you can clearly see on the board, and I do like that that adds to the immersion you feel when you're playing the game. And as you get more cards and you add them to your deck, you're kind of becoming a specialized character. You're becoming either a warrior or maybe a ranger or a healer, because you do need to get rid of wounds, so a healer is very necessary. And I like when you're playing with multiple players that everybody can make their own deck and become some kind of class, if you will. So that also adds to the theme, and I like the way that, you know, you got your monsters passing by the village, wreaking havoc, and all of the monster types are different. So thematically that works really well for me. So let's talk about the gameplay. What I like about the game is that you are presented with a lot of choices, not just during the game, but also during the setup. You can choose which kind of skill cards and action cards and attack cards and your loot cards you want to put in the market here. So the game does come with 6 scenarios plus a starting scenario that already suggests which cards to use for which faction, and you can play those, no problems, great fun. But you can always, once you're more familiar with the game, mix and match. Just try different cards and try your own strategies. And I think that's great fun and really adds to the replayability as well, which I will come to in a bit. There are also randomizer cards in the game, so you can randomize your monsters and your different cards that you want to buy. But I'm not sure if that works really well. You'd have to be really good and familiar with the game to be able to pull that off. So I would recommend just picking your own cards. I do like that the choices are hard. You really need to think about which cards do I want to put in my deck, because you're making your deck bigger and you want to be able to use those cards efficiently and trying to find out the synergy between the cards you have in your deck and the other players if you're playing with other players. So the choices are there. It's not an easy game, and I like that. It's a challenging game, and there is also no culling of your deck in the game, so you're not getting rid of a lot of cards. So your starter cards will still be in there. So you have to choose wisely. I also like the fact that you have a villager deck, which is basically an extra hand. It's 5 cards in the town square on the board with different villagers that have an ability that might help you, which I think is really fun. And you just have 5 new cards every turn. But of course, the monsters will try to kill the villagers and add corpses to that deck, making that deck less efficient as well, just like you get wounds in your own deck. And I also like that you have these traveling villagers that you can recruit if you have the resources for them. They are rather expensive. Sometimes you need plenty of gold and also a lot of this power to recruit them. But it also has these traders, these infiltrators that will instantly enter your village, you know, the red cards, and do bad things when they pop up eventually. So that's pretty cool as well. Like I said, it is a pretty tough game at first because you really need to learn what all the different monster decks do. So for example, what do the dragons do? You know, they cause burns, and when you draw a burn card, you get an extra wound. So you really want to get rid of those as quick as you can. So that will keep you busy while you're also trying to fight these monsters, and you'll get more wounds as you fight them in melee range. And there's all kinds of different things that these monsters do, so you really need to learn a strategy versus a certain monster deck. And that figuring that out is a lot of fun to me. But it is quite a challenging game at the start. And at some point you'll probably learn the best strategy so you can mix and match with different kind of cards in the market that you can buy to change that up. So there's a whole lot of replayability. Again, there is also some player interaction because you're obviously working together to fight these monsters. But like I said, if you specialize in healing, you can heal the other players and they don't have to worry about that so much. So that's also a good thing, that you can decide and discuss who takes which cards and what to focus on. You could have one person trying to get much magic so they can focus on closing the rifts, and another person just focusing on doing as much damage as they can. Playtime is roughly an hour per player, including setup and breakdown. So it is a pretty long game, relatively long for a deck builder, but that's also because there is a lot of managing to do in between the rounds. So before you start, you have to refresh your town cards, you have to refresh the traveling cards, you have to move the monsters, they take their turn, they do their thing. So that's all kinds of things you need to do before the players can finally do their thing and play their cards. So that is something you need to manage. Can be a little bit fiddly at first, but it's not too hard. And besides, the rule book is pretty good. I thought the rule book was written very well, was very easy and clear to follow, and it's not very big at all. It's about half of this book is the rules, and the other half is the scenarios that you can play, and a little bit more detail on what some skills do, what the monsters can do and what the players can do. But it also has this handy reference on the back that you can just put on the table, and you know exactly what to do before you take your hero turn. So that really helps, I think. Right, so let's talk about the replayability. I've already said that there are 6 different monster decks in the game, so that's already quite a lot of replayability. You know, before you've learned all of those and learned how to beat them, you've played plenty of games. And then aside from the scenarios in the rulebook, like I said, you can just pick your own skill and cards and actions and just mix and match with that. And then there's also some expansions. I also got this one. I haven't played that yet. I have added it to the core box, which has a Restless Dead and a Venom Brood monster deck with basically ghosts and spiders. And the spiders cause venom. You know, they poison you, which is different from, for example, the dragons causing burns. So again, all of these monster decks are very unique and very different and do different things. And it also has new hero cards, so you can become a hunter or a necromancer with different kinds of skills and loot and actions. So that's a lot of fun too. I have heard, however, there are more expansions, but some of them are not compatible together. So you either need to pick one of the expansions and add them to the base game and play with that, which I guess is fine. but you can really mix and match. I've read on several forums that that is sometimes a bit problematic, so that is kind of unfortunate. So I would certainly say if you're looking for expansions for the game, read about those or watch some videos first before you decide to get them. This one so far, from what I've seen from the cards and what I've read from the cards, looks like it is a good match and should not be a problem. I have, however, not seen any of the other expansions. But bottom line is that I think the replayability of just the core game already is very good, and if you add expansions, you'll just have more gameplay from that. Finally, there's the language dependency. Like many deck building games, this is of course very language heavy. There's a lot of text on all of the cards, so it is definitely language dependent. So you do require to have a good grasp of the English language in order to play this game. So that is basically a minus point, but it is kind of inherent to deck builders. I've so far only encountered a couple of deck builders that just use icons. I think Star Realms is one of them. I have Cthulhu Realms, which is a game which is completely language independent. But otherwise, you know, like games like Dominion or Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, they all use text on the cards. So it is kind of inherent. So that is something you need to keep in mind when looking for Shadowrift. All right, that's it. All in all, I really enjoyed this game, giving it a 2 thumbs up. Always try before you buy, of course. I'd like to thank Starling Games for sending me the game to review. I had a good time with it, and I will keep it in my collection for now. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you hit the bell icon, you'll also get a notification whenever I upload a new video. Check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support what I do. And I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.